The world of MMA is filled with highlight reel knockouts that get replayed over and over again. The biggest stars, the loudest rivalries, and the most anticipated fights always seem to dominate the headlines. But in the shadows of these blockbuster moments, there are knockouts that many fans never see, underrated finishes that deserve just as much attention. These are the moments that slipped under the radar, the knockouts that didn't get the hype they deserved, but were every bit as brutal, technical, and unforgettable. MMA is a sport where anything can happen in the blink of an eye. One perfectly timed punch, one devastating head kick. Some of the greatest knockouts come from unexpected places, fighters who weren't in the spotlight, bouts that weren't heavily promoted, or matchups that people didn't expect to produce fireworks. But those who witnessed them know just how special they were. That's what this video is about, shining a light on the forgotten, the overlooked, and the underrated. Every MMA fan remembers the legendary knockouts: Anderson Silva's front kick against Vitor Belfort, Conor McGregor's 13-second finish of Jose Aldo, or Francis Ngannou's uppercut that sent Alistair Overeem into orbit. These moments are etched in history. But what about the ones that didn't get the same recognition? What about the knockouts that deserve to be talked about just as much, but for some reason never reached the same level of fame? Picture this: a fight deep on the prelims, with only a fraction of the audience watching. A fighter steps into the cage, barely known outside the hardcore MMA community. He's fighting someone with more name value, someone expected to win. But then, in a split second, everything changes. A perfectly timed overhand right lands, and his opponent crumbles to the mat, unconscious before he even hits the ground. The crowd erupts. The commentators lose their minds. But because it wasn't a main event or a superstar delivering the finish, it gets lost in the sea of bigger headlines. These underrated knockouts are more than just moments of violence. They're proof of the unpredictability of MMA. They remind us that anyone can deliver a highlight reel finish, that every fighter stepping into the octagon is capable of producing magic. Whether it's a lightning-fast counterpunch, a spinning elbow that lands perfectly, or a knee that finds its target with devastating precision, these knockouts showcase the raw beauty of striking in mixed martial arts. One such moment happened in a fight few people were watching live. A fighter, known more for his grappling than his striking, was facing an opponent with a dangerous stand-up game. On paper, it was a clear mismatch on the feet. But then, out of nowhere, he threw a perfectly timed uppercut that connected with brutal force. His opponent's legs gave out instantly, and the referee barely had time to step in before the fight was over. The victory was stunning, but because the fighter wasn't a household name, it never became the viral sensation it should have been. Another underrated knockout came from a fighter making his UFC debut. He was brought in as an underdog, expected to be a tough test, but not much more. His opponent had more experience, more hype, and more fans. But when the fight started, it became clear that none of that mattered. A slick counter left hook landed flush, and his opponent hit the canvas in a way that left the entire arena in shock. It was the kind of knockout that instantly put a fighter on the map, yet it somehow faded into obscurity after the event ended. The technique behind these knockouts is just as fascinating as the finishes themselves. Some are pure power, a heavy-handed punch that lands at just the right moment. Others are all about precision, timing an opponent's movement, and placing a strike exactly where it needs to be. Then there are the knockouts that are a result of high-fight IQ setting traps, drawing an opponent in, and executing the perfect strike when they least expect it. One of the most underrated aspects of MMA is the ability to set up a knockout without making it obvious. A fighter might throw a few feints, forcing their opponent to react a certain way. They might disguise a head kick by throwing it with the same motion as a body kick, catching their opponent off guard. Or they might use footwork to create the perfect angle, landing a shot that their opponent never even saw coming. These are the details that separate good knockouts from truly great ones. Beyond the technique and impact, there's also the personal journey behind each of these moments. Many of the fighters who delivered these knockouts weren't big names before the fight. Some were fighting just to prove they belonged, trying to make a statement in their debut. Others were coming off losses, needing a win to keep their career alive. And for a few, these knockouts were their one shining moment in the sport, a brief but unforgettable highlight that defined their entire career. One fighter had been struggling to find his place in the promotion. He had lost a couple of fights, and many believed he was on his way out. But then, in a fight that was supposed to be his last chance, he delivered a knockout so vicious that it instantly made the world take notice. A perfectly timed knee in the second round sent his opponent crashing to the mat, ending the fight in spectacular fashion. Crowd reaction was electric, but the moment never quite got the attention it deserved. Another fighter, a veteran of the sport, had been fighting for years without ever getting his moment in the spotlight. He had faced tough competition, won some, lost some, but had never had a breakthrough moment. Then, in a fight where he was considered the underdog, he landed a spinning back fist that connected with terrifying accuracy. His opponent went stiff before hitting the ground. It was a knockout that should have been replayed 1,000 times, but instead, it was quickly overshadowed by bigger fights on the same card. These are the hidden gems of MMA, the knockouts that didn't make the front page, but deserve a place in the sport's history. They remind us why we watch, why we love this sport, and why anything can happen when two fighters step into the cage. They are proof that skill, precision, and timing can change everything in an instant. For the fans who witnessed these moments live, they were unforgettable. For the fighters who delivered them, they were life-changing. And for those who missed them, this video is here to bring them back into the spotlight. MMA is full of surprises, and sometimes the most incredible moments don't get the recognition they deserve. But now they will. These underrated knockouts may have been overlooked at the time, but today they get the attention they always should have had. So sit back, enjoy, and relive some of the most brutal, shocking, and skillful finishes you might have missed. Because in this sport, every knockout tells a story, and these stories are worth remembering.